Anybody coming in, Eric? I don't see it.
Yes.
Yeah. There's Eric and Jen. On the side.
Oh, there it is. Yeah. I just can't read it.
Yeah. They're red green dots.
That's right.
They
coming
logged
over.
in and now,
Here they are.
Jen, okay.
right, she's, Erin's name.
Hi, I'm here.
Hi, Jen, can you hear us?
I can.
Okay, hi, Eric.
Hi, Jen.
How's it going?
Hi.
But our
There.
speaker, hold on, my speaker needs to be on the owl. All right, try that again, Jen. Can you talk?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, now you're on there. Okay, so let me just.
Let's see. It looks like I froze on my end at one point.
We can hear you. I don't have your email, Carla.
My computer's like not letting me print a
Okay.
PDF. It keeps like shutting down PowerPoint. So. Not sure why it's like really overwhelming my laptop. Take a look. We're just trying to get Peter access.
She's in the last, the old one.
It's the same link. It should work.
If you're on a different browser.
Oh, I have this.
Oh,
I said-
somebody sent it to me.
Yeah, I said-
Oh, I, okay. So
Yeah.
How are we doing? Is Peter missing?
Slideshow.
It's pretty, yeah, it's pretty basic, so whatever works for you guys.
It's a large slideshow here. It was, but it wants me to open it up. My phone. Turn off my camera.
You trying to stick to
I'll
my-
do that. So Peter's not in. Do you want to start without him?
I think we'll have to.
Just on
See,
track.
what's his problem?
He said the Zoom link was expired. But
Wow.
no, so I resent another one through Zoom and
Okay,
told him to try through the town's website directly on the agenda.
okay. It's,
But others were able to get in, so it could just be.
are we recording this now? It's gonna be added to the other Zoom, so.
I will
so
record this.
If he doesn't, is not able to log, he can listen.
He can watch it. We just want to make sure that because we don't have amplification in the room, the owl is our speaker, so when we talk, at least let's try to enunciate, because
Okay.
we missed some of David's presentation in the video recording. And I'll do a transcript. just so we
Okay, well, I think Jen is very close to the. She came through that.
I can say.
Okay, call this meeting to order. I'm looking around the room here and I don't see any members of the public. And so we will move on to the approval of the minutes of the March 5th meeting. I'm sorry, April 5th. That's correct. All those, any corrections or additions or deletions from the minutes? Anybody have anything? Nothing? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed?
I
Okay.
abstain.
You're abstaining, yes, you were not
I
here.
was not here.
That's fine, thank you very much. So there'll be unanimously approved, but there are two people, one abstention and one person missing, so. Welcome, Carla.
Nice.
Seems like you've been here for a long time, huh?
Yes, yeah.
Anyway, I think, Eric, do you want to start this, having you had some conversation with her previously?
Yeah, sure. So welcome. I think, we had an earlier conversation and where we wanted to learn more about what Hope does. And so I think invited you here today. As you know, we are currently in the stage of exploring with our external partners in a learning mode so that we can better advocate for and support affordable housing in Madison. And so we know that you have a project in Madison currently in phase. We'd love to hear about that. We'd love to hear about, what kind of projects attract you? How do you garner support? What challenges you have, especially challenges working in Madison? And, ultimately how we can help and overcome, the affordable housing problem challenge within our community. So with that, again, welcome. Really appreciate you making the time and I'll turn it over to you.
Maybe a little background and then.
Yeah. So I included some background, plenty of background slides in the deck. So whenever Erin has a moment, just as a sort of backdrop to me speaking. So for anybody who's not familiar, which maybe a lot of you, Hope Partnership is an organization that's almost 20 years old. I stand if that's okay. It was hard to say. Almost 20 years old, founded in 2004 in Old Saybrook. it's a great, interesting story, the way that the group came together. Basically, one of the original co-founders was driving down Route 1. She started to get a little annoyed because she was stuck behind a school bus and she had somewhere to go. And then she realized that the school bus was stopping at all the motels. And then she realized there are school children living in motels. And so she came together with some other interested folks, and they started meeting in a church basement, and they said, what can we do about this problem? And fast forward almost 20 years, we now develop and own affordable housing in the Shoreline area in Lower Middlesex County. We started with Ferry Crossing, which is in Old Saybrook. It's actually this photo right here. You can go down to the next slide. So Ferry Crossing was opened in 2012, and there's 16 units there. And then we've got Lofts at Spencer's Corner, which opened in 2021. That's in Centerbrook. We've got 17 apartment style units there. And then, as Eric mentioned, we currently are working to get shovels in the ground and for a project here in Madison. It's on Cottage Road, on the Route 1 end of Cottage Road. And we're really excited. That will be 31 total units. There's already 4 units there, but there will be 27 additional units. And 24 of those will be affordable units. The other 7 will be market rate. So we're really excited about that. And that's sort of how I got here today. We can go to the next slide. And so what does HOPE do generally? So we obviously started as an advocacy organization, and really that just means getting out there, making sure that folks are aware of the issue of affordable housing in our region. Now, I will say that in 2004, the advocacy piece was probably more necessary than it is in 2023. I would say that the wildness of the residential real estate market that came out of the pandemic has made a far broader swath of people sensitive to housing costs and what that means to really have a truly affordable home. We've had a lot of people say to us, you know, I never really thought about affordable housing, but now either I or my daughter or my aunt or my best friend can't find a place to live, and it's really starting to hit home. We educate, you know, a lot of folks need to know more about how affordable housing works, how the development process works, what funding is out there, the ins and outs of how it applies to individuals and families. And so obviously we try to bring that information whenever it's helpful. And now we develop Spencer's Corner in Centerbrook. The Lofts at Spencer's Corner in Centerbrook was our first project where we were the sole developer. So we did not have a development partner. We did hire a consultant, but we wholly owned and developed that project all on our own. So we do have a development partner here in Madison, but we do the development work on our own as well. And we also try to facilitate. So I would say, you know, having conversations like this, working with organizations like this is how we can try to facilitate additional affordable housing coming to the areas where we work. It doesn't have to be our model. It doesn't have to be through us. Part of our mission is to make sure that it's just happening around us. And then, you know, we retain ownership of what we develop. So we wholly own Ferry Crossing and the Lofts at Spencer's Corner, and then we are a 40% partner in the Wellington at Madison. So once that, you know, our existing 4 units and ultimately 31 at the end. Go to the next slide. And, you know, a lot of folks are sort of curious how a project comes together. And in a lot of ways, it's serendipity and sort of the stars aligning, right? There are a lot of moving pieces that just have to come together at the right time, in the right place. But the number one thing is usually location. Especially when you're looking at shoreline communities, there are a lot of different considerations that have to go into figuring out a location. So for us, that means everything from, is it in a flood zone? Is it in an appropriately dense part of town? I mean, realistically, in a lot of suburban and sort of rural towns, it's not a great idea to put 25 units of housing in the middle of a field 5 miles from any amenities. And so we're really sensitive to a lot of the existing infrastructure and also how, a town has been planned and allocated in the built environment. And a lot of questions we get related to projects are also funding. And for us, funding is generally broken into 3 buckets. So obviously, we as a nonprofit organization have to sustain ourselves sort of on an ongoing basis. Thankfully, we're an extremely nimble organization in that I'm the only paid employee. And so we get a lot of savings that way. Then we have pre-development funding, which is sort of all the first steps that we might have, right? If we have to do an environmental phase 1 to check out, see what's going on with the property before we might be interested to buy it, do some general architectural, things like that. And then once we get through it and we know we're definitely going to do it, then we have our project budget. That is usually much more complicated. Our capital stack for any given project is going to be varied and often very complex. It's usually a mix of state funds, which are often federal funds as a pass through to the state, traditional financing like a mortgage, tax credit programs, grants, energy rebates. Really, it varies dramatically depending on the project. And then the final piece for us as a nonprofit and a local organization is really just being part of a community-wide effort to make something happen. I think in the past, when there's been sort of a negative idea about affordable housing, and it is often because it seems like an afterthought and it's not the purpose of something that is going in. And we exist solely to bring affordable and missing middle housing to the areas where we function. And there's really no way that we would go through with a project that doesn't really fit with how a community is envisioning its own town. And so that is something that we have sort of really built a reputation on, and it's something that we continue to have as our sort of credo moving forward and how we function as an organization. So next slide. And so, some of the specifics about our existing projects. So Ferry Crossing is 16 units, like I mentioned. Those are for the income thresholds of 25, 50, 60, and 80% of area median income. To be honest, here on the shoreline, the area median income is pretty high. And so I think a lot of people are often very surprised at what 80% of area median income really means. And here in Madison, that's about $80,000. And so, really most of the folks that are in housing for these types of income thresholds are employed. They're doing a lot of things that everyone expects someone to be doing. And then we do have other units in Ferry Crossing in particular that are designated for veterans. And so that's a great part of Ferry Crossing. The way that Ferry Crossing is structured is that we have a long-term land lease with the town of Old Saybrook on land that was originally conveyed from the state of Connecticut. So it was originally just open space, it was greenfield. And half of the greenfield was maintained for soccer fields, which is cool because there's a community use on half of it. And then folks in Ferry Crossing have the opportunity to access that, but also the community can sort of see how it works sort of seamlessly. And then we did develop this with a development partner, but we actually bought out the development, so now we're a 100% owner on this project.
Did Old Saybrook approach you with the land, or did you find the land? How did you uncover the sort of property to develop?
Well, so since Hope was an Old Saybrook grown organization, the conversation sort of happened in conjunction with folks at the town, people who were Hope board members, worked with the town to figure out how this was going to come to be. So I can't tell you exactly who approached who. I wasn't here, so I don't know the TikTok of the conversation, but it was really, truly like a group effort for that. Yeah, collaborative. Thank you. And then, we opened Lost at Spencer's Corner in 2021, right in the middle of the pandemic. So people started leasing up in March of 2021. And that's 17 units for income thresholds of 30, 50, 60, and 80% of AMI. And this was our first project as a solo developer, like I mentioned. And this is a really, really cool project because it's an adaptive reuse of existing commercial condo buildings. So this was actually brought to Hope as a concept. Someone mentioned to one of our board members, hey, you know, there's this commercial condo project. It's got some vacancies. It's had deferred maintenance. Would you ever consider putting any housing in it? And we did. So it's now 100% occupied on the ground floor, which is where the commercial and retail still exists. And those are separately owned. It is commercial condo on the first floor. And then Hope is a part of the Owners Association as lofts. So it's
Do you want questions at the end or as you go?
whatever works. I'm totally open for.
Could you talk a little bit about the mix of income percentages and also affordable housing and commercial rate housing in this new development? How do you?
Sure. So in this particular case, it's pretty evenly distributed across the 17 units at the 30, 50, 60, and 80% thresholds. We also have a mix of 1s, 2s, and 3 bedrooms here.
So there's no market rate in this one?
No market rate. So Wellington and Madison is actually the only project that we're involved with that has any market rate. And so for Hope, our intention going into a project is always to do 100% affordable. The only reason that we would bring in any market rate is just to make the financials for the general operating move into the future.
So
possible.
what makes it possible to not have market rate, let's say at Spencer's Corner
So
versus?
part of it has to do with our financing. So when you're doing affordable housing, you do get preferred financing. And so in this case, we have a forgivable loan with no debt service through the state of Connecticut. So as long as these units stay affordable for the term, we don't pay anything on the loan. And at the end of the term, it disappears.
And to speak to the
Which is 40 years.
percentages, yeah, how do you?
So they did recently change it for a couple of the programs, and I'm not sure whether this was under the previous 30 or it's under 40, because I also wasn't here when we developed this. So
How did you establish the percentages? So there are different percentages in Old Saybrook versus Centerbrook
Yeah.
versus Madison.
So that-
What did you use?
that
to
comes
determine?
down to a mix of 2 different factors. So one is back to the pro forma, trying to figure out what's going to work, right? So if you've got 100% units at 25% of AMI, very hard to make that a financially sustainable entity into the future. However, if you did that, you also get a lot more points for various funding programs through the state. And so you basically, what you have to do is you have to take a look at what is financially feasible versus what will get us more points in order to get the funding. And so you have to sort of have a balance of trying to get some of those deeply affordable units, those 25, those 30, a good mix of the middle, 50 and 60, and then if you need to, getting to those 80s and those market rate units. But again, if you lean it too heavy on the higher end of the income spectrum, you won't score well, and then you may not get funding, and then your project doesn't exist. So does that answer your
Yeah,
question?
that's very helpful.
Yeah.
And how readily available is the funding for this? If you had a piece of property here in Guilford tomorrow, could you line up and get a commitment for the money?
Yeah, so I mean, so generally speaking, any one program is not going to fund 100% of a development. And so really where the complexity and the time comes in is that you have to put together your capital stack. And so even if you get, if you get financing from CHFA and you are selected because you've scored highest, that's only going to be a portion of your development costs. So really, it's a lot of moving pieces at the same time. So it's hard to say whether you can really just move forward. It would depend on what other irons you have in the fire at the same time.
And certain grants are only available certain times of year to
Yeah, of
apply,
course.
right?
Yes,
It's not
of
a
course.
rolling-
Yeah, of course.
admission,
Every
so that can
single
delay.
funding stream has its own calendar. Some fund more than once a year, some are yearly, and you have to sort of keep track of all those different strings and how they're going to come together.
Any other questions?
I have a question about the ownership, because you said that you maintain ownership in these properties, or you try to have a certain amount of ownership. How does it actually work with regard to properties where you're actually selling condominiums? What percentage are you owning the land or?
We
how
do-
does that-
Yeah, we don't have any sales model for us. We are completely rent-based.
Okay.
So we create the units and then we maintain them for rental.
Okay.
So we don't do a sales model. There are organizations that will develop single-family homes and will sell those as part of affordable housing initiatives. And there are programs at the state that fund that specifically. That's just not Hope's model.
Okay, so you're basically the administrator of all of the monies too, once the tenants move in and monitoring the rules with regard to keeping those percentages and reporting the
The
income.
administrator
So-
of the affordability plan.
So
Yeah.
Yeah, do
we
you outsource
don't,
that?
yeah, so we don't do that in-house.
Okay.
So we use a property management firm to do the management of our properties. And so you would see that in most cases where there's affordable housing funding used to develop a property, just because it is fairly complex and onerous to keep that affordability component satisfied. And so you do need someone with the expertise to do that and the capacity. And as I'm the only employee of Hope, we don't have that with only one person.
That's pretty
on
common.
staff. It
To
is.
hired,
To be
and it's a requirement, it went, especially with 830, in compliance with the state, you have an affordability plan and you have to identify who the administrator of that plan is at the time of approval.
Yeah.
So, and that's really under the Planning and Zoning Commission to maintain that and make sure that you're getting the annual reports. To make sure we don't lose any affordable units, really, that's. And not as much with a nonprofit, but in a developer's sense, that's where you can run that risk.
Yes.
How do you do? I'm
Oh,
sorry.
sorry.
Go
Is
ahead.
there one third party auditor who's watching all of your properties? I mean, how does that work financially?
So we do have an auditor that reviews our finances. And, most funders require auditing of some sort or another. The state and some of the other funding programs can also invoke an audit if they think that something's going on or they have some reason to as well. So that's fairly standard to audit in the.
I know CHFA on some of its programs insists on the right to vet your various vendors.
All federal and state programs have, I think, you have to.
Usually you have to select them ahead of time. So like, for instance, when you apply for your funding, you have to have your property management lined up. And in the case of the state of Connecticut, they have to be an approved vendor. So they have oversight over them as that type of vendor as well.
Anything more, Jane? Anything?
No.
Eric? No, Jen? No question. I wanted, just, I'm curious, because you're the only person on staff, the paid staff. How do you figure out the financing? I mean, is it this, you got a little spreadsheet and you sit down in the office and do that, I mean, how do you figure out how you can do it? How
Yeah,
it can
so-
be actually done?
So we previously used a development consultant to develop the lofts, and we, endeavoring to do our next project would also engage a consultant to do that.
So they do the calculations in the financing package.
Yes, yeah. So basically, part of their work is to put together what the capital stack would look like for our project and how we would do it. I will say that it's a pretty small group in Connecticut of folks who have expertise on the various funding programs and who have done this type of development. And so they really know it well. They know all the folks at the state, they know people on our board. They're all sort of connected, and a lot of folks who have been doing this have been doing it for a long time and have been doing it all across the state, which is helpful, obviously.
Something to think about it and bringing in one of those managers and just so we understand a little bit more how that works. So,
Just one more question for Levon.
Sure.
You kept referring to your solo status there. How full is your dance card? If we had a piece of property tomorrow, how many years before you'd have the capacity?
So, we are, because Wellington is pretty much on its track, and we're just closing out the last few remaining items before we can break ground. We're right now in the midst of identifying what our next project is going to be. So we're in those conversations. And I will say that lots of towns in our region are interested at this point in doing a project. I think that for a lot of folks, a project feels tangible, it feels possible, where some of the other types of work related to affordable housing feel a little bit bigger, like doing, a full zoning overhaul or, land banking or something like that. So I think a lot of towns are in that headspace of maybe we do a project and see how it goes. Next slide, if that's okay. And so, and we come to the Wellington, and I will tell you that this is my second appearance in this room, and then I will be on P&Z tomorrow to talk to people from the town of Madison about Wellington. So happy to be here again. But like I said, Wellington's going to be a total of 31 units once it's fully built, and there's already 4 units there. Interesting mix here. We're doing 1s and 2 bedrooms with 25% units, 50% units, 60% units, and then 7 market rate units. We are working on Wellington with another nonprofit developer out of Massachusetts called the Caleb Group, and they own thousands of units across several states, and they have really made it. They're another mission-based organization, though. They develop affordable housing with the intention of developing affordable housing. It's not just part of their portfolio. Another reason we're really excited about Wellington is because we get to do another construction type. So this is going to be a mix of new construction and historic rehab. So we're really excited to keep the historic red house, and there's going to be 4 apartments in it once we're finished. And so that's going to be fantastic. And then the rest of the units are going to be sort of that, what I refer to as suburban townhouse style, which is already there. And then we're hoping to close on our financing in the coming weeks and have a groundbreaking maybe this summer. So that's where we are with Wellington. And then, we've been asked in the past, what are some of the challenges? Where are the misses, right? Hope as an organization is really lucky that we've had a lot of hits, but we have had 1 miss. And we tried to do a development in Old Lyme, and it did not happen. We actually do happen to own 3 parcels of land on which 3 affordable homes that are owned by the owners live in Old Lyme, but it's not our model. We got that through absorbing the Old Lyme affordable housing organization. But we did try to do another development that was sort of in our wheelhouse, and it didn't happen. And so it was a pretty standard tale of affordable housing. The sort of the public sentiment from the small group that was opposed to it was just that they don't want that density of housing in that location. We thought it was a good location. It was right off of the highway ramp in Old Lyme, which generally speaking, you want to put those parcels to their highest and best use. And we thought that it'd be great to put housing on it. And ultimately, with a nonprofit developer, we do not have the deep pockets to fight that sort of appeals process. And so, unfortunately, this almost ended the organization because it really wiped us out financially. But we did have an amazing community come together in Old Lyme to sort of refund us as an organization. And it's really has catapulted us into a tremendous growth period over the past 4 years. So it's obviously, we wish the project would have happened, but things happen how they happen, and we're happy with how we are in 2023. So
Good question. How many units was the proposal?
I believe it was over 30, if I'm remembering correctly. Yeah, so it would have been our largest
Were they individual or was it an apartment building? What was it?
It was going to be a similar sort of like suburban townhouse style.
Well, let's go back to what you said before
Sure.
about your education. You said things were worse back in 2012.
So,
People are beginning to understand. First of all, when did this happen?
so this was, I believe that the project was initiated in 2016, and then the next couple of years was the pre-development phase. And so I think we were officially done with the project
And
a
did the
couple
town,
or a few years after that.
did the town support you?
We did have initial town support. You know, we really don't go into any process without having a full lay of the land in terms of how the community feels. And so with something like this, it really is a matter of like a few people who were well-funded, were not in favor, and that's sort of what happens. But we really don't go into any project without having that initial support from town government and sort of the obvious members of the community that are already involved. And that was the case here as well.
Was it an approval that was appealed and rather than going through litigation?
Part of the issue just came down to, we were literally running out of money to like redo architecturals over and over and over again for like site plan modifications, but things that were more drastic. And at a certain point, we just couldn't keep doing that. So I think we avoided any major litigation, but yeah.
So do you think now, after that experience, though, was that a failure of education, or do you think they're just one or two people that have money and they just didn't want to have it happen, and they were going to do whatever they had to do to stop?
Yeah, so I mean, I think
I'm
it's
just thinking what would happen here.
Yeah.
We decided, something is starting to build up.
Yeah.
Where does the resistance come from? It's just individuals? I mean,
I think when you're working in small towns, which is where Hope works exclusively, that's sort of our area. You really, there's sort of a microclimate in each town in terms of their feelings about affordable housing, in terms of their feelings about their built environment, in terms of their ideas about zoning. And quite frankly, I think that, Old Lyme had a very specific idea at the time of what they wanted Old Lyme to look like, and what they might want from affordable housing. And really, I think what we've learned is that they're really only interested in sort of single family homes on larger lots, which is, there is a model out there. Everyone knows Habitat for Humanity. They build single family homes for ownership. It's just not our model. And so, we can't pivot to be something we're not in that case. And I think anyone who, and I'm assuming most of you are following statewide conversations about this issue, and you look at sort of similar towns to a Madison or an Old Saybrook further down the coast in Fairfield County, and the conversations are drastically different from the ones that you all are having, from the ones that folks in Old Saybrook are having. There's an incredible amount of nuance, but there's also an incredible difference in the way that different parts of Connecticut, I think, are responding to housing issues. And so from all I can gather, it's really just based on sort of leadership and a general sentiment that exists, sort of an X factor, if you will, that you can't necessarily put your finger on. That being said, all it takes to fully stop a project is a couple of very well-funded opponents. And a project in Branford that is thankfully underway now, it took 4 years to clear the litigation, and thankfully they had pro bono attorneys, but not every project has that sort of support. So
I'm just curious, the land in Old Lyme, is it vacant, or did something ever happen on it?
it's a good question. I think that it may still be vacant, but I will say that there's actually a much larger apartment complex going in Old Lyme in a different location with a lot higher density than what we were proposing.
Are they affordable?
They're not.
So they've got bigger pockets.
You mentioned that you own that land in Old Lyme. So
We
what
do.
happened there? You still own it?
We do. So it's sort of, we have a long-term land lease with the homeowners, And so it doesn't, it's sort of, it's a traditional model for keeping things affordable, but it doesn't, we can't do anything with it, essentially. They have to stay as they are, which is fairly large lots. I think that they're maybe half an acre to an acre. And then the houses are owned by the people that live there. And then what can a town do to encourage affordable housing development? You know, obviously I've read through your affordable housing plan. I've read through lots of affordable housing plans now that they've all been completed. And, you know, most of them are sort of a mix of a variety of different things, right? Dipping into some zoning, dipping into some infrastructure, dipping into some project development. And I think that that's the right approach, having a menu and sort of deciding for your individual microclimate, what do we want to see happen? But broadly speaking, I would say that these are sort of the areas that I would encourage any town to think about. One is zoning, and not just for sort of denser district zoning, but I think also taking a look at your residential districts and saying, could we do as of right duplexes in some of these, or triplexes or quadplexes? That's not our model. It doesn't help Hope specifically, but it is a really low barrier to entry in terms of a regular builder could decide to do a duplex instead of a single family home. And then you've got a different type of housing in your town. And I really like to mention to folks about that specifically is that I live in Guilford with my family, and there's a couple of duplexes right down the street from us. And you would never, ever know driving by them that they are multifamily housing unless you stop and take a look at it. And so I'm always happy to send those addresses to folks who want to take a look at them on Google Maps Street View. The other thing that towns do, and we're really thankful that the town of Madison did this for us with Wellington, is property tax abatements. We've also gotten one in Old Saybrook. And what that means is that a project can continue to be financially viable into the future. So Hope's really proud that our projects are self-contained, meaning that they fund themselves. We don't have to pour additional funding in. And it also means that we're not taking thousands of dollars out of them. And so one way that that can be achieved is by having property taxes that are much lower than they would be if they were assessed at the market rate of our buildings. Another thing that a lot of towns obviously look at when they're doing affordable housing is land banking or allocation. And that's sort of to your question about if you had a parcel tomorrow. A lot of towns want to be able to tee that up. If they have a partner and they meet a developer who's interested to do what the town has in mind, they want to be able to say, great, we have this spot for you right over here. And that can come with, you know, the appropriate zoning or without, but I think having the land already allocated, already banked is an easy way to sort of get moving on a project. Another one that comes up all the time on the shoreline is infrastructure, right? We get asked a lot about what we do about sewer and septic. And we thankfully, because our projects are what I like to refer to as appropriately dense, can service them with septic, but having sewer, having water access, it does make a difference. And so if there is an area where you think you want to have higher density, you know, adding that service is gonna make it a lot easier.
But a very big deal for town.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And I think that that's why, you know, one of the conversations we have when we talk to towns is like, can this housing be part of a broader planning? Right? And housing is a great anchor if you ever want to start a new district, right? And when we've had towns approach us and say, we've got this whole area, this whole stretch, we want to revitalize it. And I say, well, housing is a great way to start, but you know, maybe you want to have a larger look at what you can do. And if you wanted to do small sewer or water expansion projects, if there's a place where you can sort of build upon a variety of uses, that's the best bang for your buck for sure. And then the final thing is just grants. You know, we've had towns offer a variety of different types of direct contributions to not only our organization, but other organizations, just to make it financially feasible to do this kind of work. I think that might be the last one, if I can remember correctly. We've already had some questions, but obviously I'm happy to answer any more that come up, so.
Who has moved into Ferry Crossing in the Centerbrook property?
I mean, like what type of
you know,
person?
No, local people,
Yeah,
you know,
so,
mostly, or is it?
yeah, so I will tell you that we did an infographic for the applications that we got for Lofts at Spencer's Corner. And we had folks from as far to the west as Bridgeport, as far north as Windsor Locks, and as far east as New London. So you can draw that triangle and
yeah.
you could fill it in with some gaps. That being said, the closer you got, the higher the applications are. And what we've seen, and I'll open up the hood for you on Wellington, is that right now, since our article came out in the Register about a month and a half ago about Wellington, I'm getting probably twice as many inquiry calls as I was before. And I'll tell you that about 50% of them are specifically for Wellington. They're not general housing, or they're not looking at one of our other properties. They're specifically asking about Wellington and when we're going to open up. I have someone who lives overseas who contacts us repeatedly, like every couple of weeks or every month, to ask if the application period's open yet, because they want to move back to Madison, someone who lived here, you know, before. So I will say that for projects like ours, where they are smaller scale, and you know, we don't have huge options for larger bedrooms. We have mostly 1s and 2s with a few 3s, and Wellington has no 3s. It is going to be a lot of folks who are either already live in town or want to return to town because they either want to retire there, or you know, they may be a younger person who wants to be able to move back to the town they grew up in. But
So they're familiar
housing.
with it, in other words, they're not coming from California, or, you know.
In most, yeah,
Yeah.
I would say that almost never does someone find a great option from that far away. And part of it has to do with the fact that, you know, the stars really have to align to get into a unit like this, because there's so few available. You really have to be in the right place at the right time, not only because there's so many people that want them, but because the process is so onerous to get in. And so, you know, we've had folks where they've been on our wait list for a long time, and then when a unit comes up, they say, it's just not a good time for, like, I can't really move right now. And so I think that's another thing to take into consideration, is that having a variety of housing, whether it's affordable or market rate, really impacts the ability for folks to move in and out of these types of units too, because even if someone could potentially, you know, because of the way that they budget or however it works, move into a market rate unit, if you don't really have rental units available in your town, or you don't really have 1 bedrooms where they don't have to maintain a yard, they might opt for this option because they technically are income qualified at 80% or something like that. So it's important to us to not only focus on the affordable housing piece, but really, what's your continuum of housing? What does that look like? Do you have a mix of different types? And Madison's in a place now, a growth period for sure, where you're seeing some different types of housing come online, which is great. It allows folks to then move into your more standard, which is, you know, your 3, 4, 5 bedroom house on a large lot, because now they have somewhere else they can go, right? There are lots of folks that we hear from all the time who don't want to be living in their houses anymore, but they want to stay in their town, and that's really the only way they can do it. And so having that variety really speaks to that, and we hear it all the time. Like, I grew up in Madison, I used to live in Madison, I work in Madison, I want to retire in Madison. I hear it literally twice a week. So,
I'm sorry.
We need another Wellington.
Yes,
Yeah, we do, yeah.
several. You mentioned a set aside for veterans. Was that due to special financing, or was that just your choice?
I can't speak for what the impetus was, but the way that it works is it's designated for folks who have a VASH voucher, which is the type of housing voucher that comes through the VA.
So it is
So-
financially.
Well, that doesn't, so just to clarify, it's like we don't subsidize it. So
It's
it
on
really
their side.
doesn't, right, so it's on their side. So it really doesn't, from our perspective, it doesn't matter whether they're getting it from a voucher, from their job, from a family member, like it doesn't translate to us at all because we don't subsidize funding. So.
So what are your thoughts about a set aside, fractional set aside for, say, town employees?
I'm not sure how if you're going to use state funding, I'm not sure how you legally do it, is the question. I think if you had private financing, you can,
Do it.
you know, we get questions like this about a variety of different types of really targeted housing. And at the end of the day, I think it really comes down to whether you can,
You have to do affirmative marketing. I know with CHFA. money.
yeah. Yeah, you have to affirmatively market for most of the funding buckets that you use for affordable housing development, but most of them also prohibit any type of exclusions in certain categories. So I'm not sure whether you could say, you know, an employee exclusively of one organization. That's something that I just can't speak to.
Can you speak to what the application process will look like once that opens for the long term?
Yes, so the wait list will open and hopefully it will be lined up so that folks can complete the full application at the time. You do have to recertify every single year for affordable units like these. So what we're trying to avoid is opening up the wait list too far in advance and then having to recertify people again before they could potentially move in.
So what causes the recertification? What triggers the recertification? Because on a purchase, you know, if it's, they don't annually recertify, correct? If the buyer doesn't have to, you qualify once to purchase and they're not requalified every year to.
We only
remain in a
do
purchase.
rental,
But as
yeah.
far as, is it because it's a rental, it requires an annual?
I can't speak to the purchase process for the affordable housing programs that exist for home buyers, but the way that it works for us is that we have certain funders that require the recert. So you have to do it every year.
I haven't heard that before.
I think when you buy it, there's a limit on how much you
I can sell it.
can make on it.
Yeah, I think that's more
Well,
of an
there
issue.
is,
Yeah.
there's a
So would-
maximum sales price.
Right.
So you were able to buy it at a certain rate because of your income.
Right,
at
but
the
if
time.
you hold it, if
Yeah,
you,
but you can only also make it appreciate so much.
And
You
if
can't,
the
that's-
point
you
is on
can,
your own income. you have
yeah,
to
but if your
qualified
income then
by.
exceeds over the time period that you
I
own
think if
those,
you win the
there's
lottery
no-
and get $100 million, you'll still have the house.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's what I
that's
was
what
gonna
I
get
think.
at,
So
is that you're
that's-
buying the house because of your circumstances.
But not
You
with
can't-
the rental.
But with a rental, that makes sense to me because you don't own it. And when that person sells it, they can only sell it for so much, no matter how much they're.
yeah, they're not gonna make a.
Because in.
Well, they may make some
Well,
profit,
but, yeah,
but-
not- but it's limited. And
yes.
so what, if their income goes up, it doesn't matter because they can still only profit so much from the house that they purchased.
But it doesn't create, there's nothing that pushes them to
Out.
a market rate unit and opening it up for somebody
But
who.
rental, it
Needs
makes
it.
more sense to me anyway, that the reason that you would have to qualify every year is because if your salary increases exponentially, then you shouldn't be living there because the rent is not commensurate with what it was agreed to. So then that apartment should be available for a different person. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
so it's sort of what I'm saying. So you can't push anyone out. And so what we don't do is
Yeah.
evict someone if they're over income. What it means for us is that we have to reconfigure our full structure of the organization or of the project. So basically, if you have 10 units and you've got 5 of them are 50% AMI and 5 of them are market rate, if you have somebody who is in the 50% who now makes over that, you have to then move them into the next market rate unit. They don't actually have to move,
I get.
but just,
Yeah.
and then to open it back up to another 50%. So basically, for us, it just means more work on the management side, but for the folks that live there, it doesn't disrupt them.
And they're comparable units between the 25, the 30, the 50?
They're all
I mean,
the same.
They're all the
Yeah,
same.
they're all the same. Wellington's gonna be interesting just because we
They are a little different.
yeah, because they are a little bit different. So the historic house and the new construction are going to be all part of the same mix. So the affordable units and the market rate will be leased out, however that works. And then the 4 existing are part of the 7 market rate. So it's because it's such a weird
Sure.
mix of existing versus new construction.
Okay.
But the housing continuum conversation is one that I think is really important. And I do like to mention that we did have someone move out of lofts last summer to buy a house. So, I think that we've also seen folks who have lived in Ferry Crossing this entire time, but they have seen sort of an appreciable difference in their income and their standard of life. And so I think that there's a mix of results in terms of what you look at for folks who come into affordable housing. And sometimes that means moving on to a different type of housing, and sometimes that doesn't. But it's important to have it as a resource for the community.
We'll go back to the list.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
I have clients
Yeah.
that are gonna be looking to do this.
Yes.
So, you open it up, you
Mhm.
announce that you're opening it up tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
And it's all dependent on who gets all of their paperwork in, everything that is necessary for the actual application. And then is it first come, first served? How are the people selected? What's the process there?
So it's going to depend on, yes, what you said about making sure your application's complete, but also it's gonna depend on how
Where
many
they fall
units,
within the
exactly,
categories.
how many units are available at their income threshold
Gotcha.
and how many bedrooms they need. And so it is a fairly, it's fairly
Pretty
complicated.
complicated. Yeah.
We have a lot of folks who call me and they say, well, I'm not sure I want to apply yet. Let me know how long the wait list is. And I say, well, that's not how our wait list works. So we actually have many wait lists because every single income limit and bedroom size has its own wait list at our property management firm. So that's where it gets kind of complicated to sort of tell people, yes, you're at the top of the list, because it's hard to know based on exactly what they're going to come in at in terms of income, the size they need, et cetera. So.
And you're not currently taking a list of people who are interested,
No.
you are going to announce this far and wide. And
Yes.
that's how people will know.
Yes, we
Okay.
absolutely do not maintain any sort of list. I just
Okay.
have lots of people say to me, oh no, someone told me they took my name. We're not taking anyone's name. Your name is not going anywhere. It has not been recorded. It's not until you're officially an applicant and you're on the wait list that is possible. So.
Eric, anything you want to add to that?
I'm sorry, were you asking me?
Yeah, I was asking you if there's anything you want to add, any other,
No.
and Jen, and I guess, I don't know whether Peter is on.
Peter didn't.
He never got on, okay.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
You had mentioned somebody from overseas. What percentage are out of Connecticut that might be applying?
Very low. This person that was overseas used to live in Madison. They just
Okay.
don't right this minute.
Okay, just making
Yeah.
sure.
They went to get affordable housing somewhere, right?
Ostensibly.
Do you waitlist the market rates, or do you just?
So we can maintain a wait list for you do just for like due diligence, like to make sure that you've got, you don't have vacant units. But it doesn't have any regulations on it the same way that the affordable units do. So we have had a couple of people recently actually who asked me about the market rate units at Wellington, and I was happy to let them know that we've already got 4 there, and they're, our property manager was able to take their names so that if we do have vacancy, they can just.
What is the market?
Out of the 30 units you have at the Wellington, how many applicants do you think will come in the door?
We had over 170 at Lofts, and I would say just based on the amount of interest I'm getting already, I would say it's gonna far surpass that at Wellington.
I get calls every week, multiple calls asking about it.
It's a great location for this kind of housing, it really is.
I mean,
How about the units that are there now? Has there been turnover or sales from those units? Do you know, the 4 that are existing?
They
Or
are
those all-
rentals. They're
Those are
rentals.
rentals.
Yeah, they're all rentals, but actually the people that live there have been there for a
I've
while.
been there the
Yeah.
whole time.
Yeah, well, I can't say the whole time. I don't know if they moved in at construction, but they've been there for.
So you're
a while.
managing that currently?
Yes, yeah, so our property management firm manages the Wellington. currently.
And is Caleb Group looking to stay as the majority partner in that.
Yeah,
That's
we
the
haven't had
structure that
any,
you're
we
gonna
haven't had any conversations about an exit for either
follow. Yeah,
partner.
I
at this
just
point.
thought of that because
Yeah,
you bought out the
Yeah.
last
Yes,
partner.
yeah, we haven't, at this point, Caleb is a developer owner, so they maintain ownership long-term for their units too. They own a few other projects in Connecticut. So we have not had a conversation about either party exiting the deal anytime soon, so.
You mentioned regulation of the lease and requirements. I assume then there's protection for the residents against eviction, except for just cause.
Yeah, so there is, and I will tell you that sort of philosophically, we are fairly understanding as an organization. We have had instances, but I will tell you, it's not often, it's rare, where folks are either in arrears or they're doing partial payments or something. And we just try to be flexible with them and work with them. And quite frankly, that has worked fairly well. We have not had to do many evictions at all.
But is it just as a legal matter, federally funded housing authority and federally subsidized
Right.
tenants have had perpetual renewing lease unless they violate it, don't pay the rents.
Mhm.
Assume the same is true for you.
I don't, that's a good question. I can't answer it with any sort of legal veracity. So I would have to check with our attorney on that, but
So you said you don't kick anyone out if they become over income, you just move them into the non-affordable housing category.
yes, legally we can't actually kick them out anyway, so,
Okay, so
yeah,
that's
yeah.
comes,
Yeah.
a restriction that comes with your funding.
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
yeah.
And I think that's gonna cover the
Yeah.
people who remain income eligible, for sure.
right.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you.
So when can we start work?
I know.
Yeah,
Well, I guess, yeah, that's the one thing you didn't touch on, or were the challenges in Madison specifically,
So,
if that's.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, if it's helpful.
Interest.
I will tell you that all of my board members love this project because they didn't have to go to one hearing on it because we bought it with approved plans. So maybe that's the key to all affordable housing is just buy it with approved plans. But, so, Aaron has been great and, the one thing I will say is like, it all adds up for nonprofit developers. I think that for-profit developers, the idea of having to do site plan modifications or any small thing that changes is not a big deal. They can budget for it. And we can, the project's still gonna move forward regardless, but every single step that happens for a nonprofit it can be a big step. And so thankfully, working with the town of Madison has been easy and smooth. But any additional work that we have to do can make it harder for us as an organization. We just have less of a cushion than a for-profit developer.
Yeah, so there were modifications to the site plan from the previous, in acquiring an already approved plan, that was some of the challenge.
Mhm.
There were, changes to their community building that.
Facade changes.
Yeah, that ended up requiring, our process requires our design committee, ACA, to review them, planning, and so, we spell out very specifically in our regulations what can be considered a minor modification that can be handled administratively versus through the full commission, and which is a safeguard in most cases, I think, but in this case, it seems like bureaucratic red tape most of the time, and there was definitely some frustration, I think, in having to go through that process, and additional costs, and I think I sort of inherited some of this by coming in the middle of the process, so that's where we are currently. It's going before the Planning and Zoning Commission tomorrow to have them approve the modifications.
But I think,
So you've not ever started from scratch with something in Madison then?
no,
This was, Aaron, can I
This
ask
was
you?
the- this was Dowler's
I was just gonna
that-
ask you,
yeah.
was this a long ago approved, was it Dowler?
yes.
It was.
Because I'm,
It was not affordable in
no,
the
no, because
beginning,
I'm thinking to myself as I've been listening to
because
this.
you were on the
I was on
commission.
New Zealand and I'm like, I wasn't
Yes.
involved when we
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
approved, something that was supposed to be sold like regular
Yeah.
sell.
Yeah.
And it was townhouses, I remember
Yes.
the garages underneath. Or do these have garages?
This is
They do not
different.
have
This has
garages.
been
So
modified
so you've
since.
modified all that, okay,
Yeah.
but that, isn't that, so that's
It
what
was the
this
same
is?
one, yes.
Okay,
It's the same development.
so that, and that never ended up happening, and. but
Which
then
is why you have 4 built
already.
And a foundation.
and a foundation, right?
And then what happened? They just walked away?
No, they just,
They sold
they didn't.
right?
Oh,
want to
they
look.
decided they
I mean,
wanted to do it.
Steven's on the board.
Yeah, he
He'll
is.
probably speak to that better than.
Okay, so then you guys came along and said, well,
Well, they got the recession, they ran into the.
is that what
problem
happened there?
Among other things.
Because I left,
Yeah.
then I left and I.
Which is
lost track.
lucky that, you know, even that the statutes have changed to allow these approvals to still be valid after so many years. I mean, this,
Because that was a long time ago.
yeah, I mean, the things that were approved around,
Yeah.
yeah, essentially, the statutes,
when
I
I
think,
first
changed in
glanced.
2011 for,
So from the
Allowing.
standpoint of the two of you, how much easier would it be if it were a joint project between you and the town? So rather than find the property together, ideally municipal property.
well, there's still the approve, even town, the town is
Yeah,
still
town still has
subject
to
to
go
all
through
the
its own-
zoning, you know, the regulatory process, just as any other applicant.
You know, I think to that question and sort of to add a little bit to what Erin was saying, I think the biggest thing for towns to think about is like, are our codes overly onerous? And should we pivot? Because really, it shouldn't be on, you know, an individual town employee to have to break the bad news to us that it's, you know, that our modifications are over the minor requirement. It's looking at, you know, could we make some changes to that code that don't require that level of detail for a plan, right? Like, could we move to some form-based zoning? Could we move to some more as of right possibilities? Does every single project need to go through an aesthetic review? I mean, I think those are questions that towns just need to ask themselves about, like, are there components of our code that are maybe hindering?
And then even in other aspects, having town employees who understand the process, the financial process, the tax abatements or the grant, you know, and working with your consultant in trying to partner on grant applications or tax, and some of those just like, I gotta read this, you know, and the town doesn't have a grant administrator, and you have to understand, you know, and the town has to administer when you're partnering in certain grants, so you have to be certified through the state to be an administrator. So the town has to be prepared to have somebody who can dedicate their time to understand how to do all of this stuff,
100%.
and the manpower. And that's something I'm kind of learning. And then also on top of it, the management aspect of our affordable units. I mean, you know, tracking them and reporting them.
Yeah.
So there,
Is that a realistic thing for a town to be in a party? Is that happening?
yes, it does.
Yeah.
Oh, it does.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
For most
And that's
smaller
where we're
towns,
trying
yeah.
to work in that.
Yeah,
So-
for most smaller towns, that part shouldn't be overly onerous just because you don't have that many units to be counting. The only challenge, I think, for some of these smaller towns in the next 5 years is that there's going to be turnover. So being able to put your finger on which units did expire and which opted to stay affordable is going to
We
be.
have a very low number because, you know, 90 of our 130 something affordable units are rentals that are maintained. So the ownership aspect is a little more onerous and
Yeah.
but it's only going to grow, hopefully, at this point. But the town hasn't established a formal process or staff who would be managing this. And quite frankly, maybe we want to, and that's something that as a committee, you'll have to assist us with a recommendation, and we may want to outsource. We don't have a housing authority. And that's something that worked well in Guilford with their partnership with the housing authority. And even their housing authority was willing to administer for a fee for private developers, you know, their affordable housing. So there are, and it wouldn't be challenging for the town. We just have to budget to hire an administrator. So these are steps that we just have to commit to.
But by the way, you did touch on something that scared me to death when I saw the numbers. We're about to lose thousands of affordable housing units potentially unless the owners, because their obligation under the various funding sources is running out. Some of them were 30 years.
State,
and
No,
those are-
in the state.
those are digging out. Now, unless they re-up, do we know how many of our units are within the next 5 years?
Is this the chapel, is that what it's associated, it's for?
Yes, there's the,
We have-
it's also DOH funding, but that's.
And
obviously
that's
newer.
that's fluid, I think, in town, and that is our number that really fluctuates. And I have the numbers, maybe 6 in town, that have
We don't
gone.
Well, it's
have that
rentals,
yet.
it's rentals too. It's not just the Chafa homeownership.
So
It just depends on what.
it's USDA funding, I think, that.
Concord is-
Yeah,
Sure.
USDA
has.
specifically what they highlighted in the article as that clock is ticking down now. So I think
That's-
this is the first year.
And like I was saying before, those are actually a little bit easier to keep track of because you're gonna have a bunch of them, right? So
That's
of the
one,
total, right,
yeah.
you're gonna have like 20 at one, those are all the same time.
Yeah,
frame,
that
the
is the
same
entire
30 years.
development of
So-
Concord Meadows. That takes our majority of our affordable.
Sarah, do you have the name of the development consultants that Hope has been using?
Yes.
I mean, it'd be great, I think, if we could have them come in and talk to us about the process.
You mean Caleb? Oh, Liz.
No,
Yeah.
not Caleb, but me.
Liz
Yeah,
Torres,
Liz.
yes.
Okay, I didn't know who it was.
Housing Smarts,
Yeah.
right, is her
Yeah.
Yeah, so-
company.
Yeah, let's,
Well,
I think
maybe
we'd like to-
Caleb would be good.
Pardon?
Maybe Caleb would be good. Are they?
Caleb would be
anybody
good,
local?
but I think.
they're Massachusetts based.
That would be
Yeah,
a.
I think we need to learn a little bit more about the process.
Liz can
and they-
answer
and
a
they
lot.
can help us,
Yeah,
right?
she's done a lot, and we also
Yeah.
know a couple of other development consultants who have done this work for other
And
projects.
let me
too,
ask
so.
one other question, and that is the education side of this thing, or the responsibility
Yeah.
or the mission. What have you done to educate people?
What does that strategy look like in the past?
Yeah.
So one of the things that Hope has done very well over the past 20 years is had a very strong tie to faith-based communities. And so we've had a variety of different faith leaders on our board and also had a strategy tied specifically to working with faith-based communities about bringing awareness about affordable housing to their congregations and to folks who are involved that way. And so that's been one way that our organization has really worked with communities to sort of get them to understand the need for affordable housing and what that actually looks like. What it looks like in practice is that a member of our board or one of our committees or me can come to a meeting, whether that's, in a church basement, whether that's a community meeting, whether that's, a round table around your kitchen table, whatever works, and just sort of have an open conversation about what the challenges are, what the population that we serve is dealing with, what the development process looks like, and what the strategies might be to move the needle. So that's the work that we've done in the past. We're sort of looking at our education and advocacy strategy right now, because like I said, the public sentiment around affordable housing has changed dramatically since when Hope started to now. This body exists, right? It didn't exist in 2004. And so we're starting to think about what does the message look like now, as opposed to, almost 20 years
To
ago.
a certain extent, I mean, I don't know whether I'm right or not, but I suspect that out of the 18,000 people who live in Madison, that most really are not even, this is not on their radar, much less understanding or have pro or can't, pro
Yeah.
or against. So at least what sounds like you have been talking to the converted in a way.
I will tell you that I did have the CEO of a financial institution tell me that their stepson might be a possible candidate for this type of housing. So I think that, while it's true that in a town like Madison, a lot of folks are not worried about their housing and therefore are not worried about it as a policy issue, I think far more people now are aware of it as an issue. And I think also the public dialogue has escalated significantly. So even if you're just a casual reader of news, I think you're seeing a lot more about affordable housing now than you did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
Yes.
I would say,
Are there any statistics on local need?
Not great recent ones. So some of the data collection is pre-pandemic.
It is.
So it's
And
not-
we have some of
it's not
that
big.
in our affordable housing plan, at least the cost burdened,
Yeah.
percentage
Yeah.
in town. But your
Better
faith-based
statewide.
kind of struck a chord because that's kind of the route that the town initially started with the interfaith group to create Concord Meadows. And then also, we're members of South Central Regional Council of Government.
Yep.
And so
Very
Scrog,
familiar with Scrog.
yeah, and so with Ben Fink as facilitator, that's sort of where we are. And we have next week is our power mapping session that we're hoping to do on Tuesday afternoon. And that's where we're going to identify these groups. And the faith leader, you know, that was one of the first, you know, aside from fire departments and things like that.
Yeah.
I think that's a great first step in building this network to start educating and meeting people at their,
Absolutely.
where they're comfortable.
I'd
Yeah.
say you were in.
I just had one last question that worked for me that is totally not about any others that we're talking about, but it's this other little issue about that I can't quite get over. I get there's always a very strong desire to make sure everything is near transit. Like everything I read, okay, we want to put it near transit.
Yep.
And I get the reason why.
Yep.
But since you already are very familiar with a couple of communities in Old Saybrook.
Yep.
Like the people that live in those units, do they own cars?
Yes. And
Okay, and the reason I say that is this keeps going around for me is that I get the thought of, okay, being near transit, that's convenient. But really, in reality, who's living in Connecticut without a car?
Yeah.
And so the fact that, so I'm having a hard time with this enormous concentration, because there's only so much space around the train station here.
Mhm.
And so if there's other property elsewhere, why is that not something we should be thinking about?
Yeah, so I will also, just full disclosure, I'm a former municipal employee myself. I used to run transportation. I was the deputy director of transportation for a while in the city of New Haven, and also did economic development there. So transportation is something I can definitely speak to. I think the one thing you want to think about when you're thinking about transit-oriented development in a community like Madison is that it doesn't necessarily mean train proximity. For us, we just like to say on a bus line if possible. Also, we've actually even also had even more rural towns come to us and say, we have absolutely no transit serving this area where we want you to take a look, but we think that we're going to put in a bike plan and we're going to add protective bike facilities and upgrade our sidewalks. And so to me, the intention, especially in Connecticut, because to your point, we're very much a suburban state with a handful of urban centers, is that you just have to be thinking about what does this look like in terms of moving the needle an inch forward. It doesn't have to be perfect transit-oriented design to make it a little bit better for someone who may not be able to own a car. We just want, when we cite a project, we just want people to be in a situation where if something happened, like their car broke down, or they were in a one-car household, but they had two working members, that they could still functionally live their lives. And I think for a lot of people who primarily function by car, which is most people in Connecticut, it's sort of hard to imagine that, but I can say that I used to do it. My husband and I used to be a one-car household with two small kids, both working full-time, and it is a lifestyle that is possible, but it does need a lot more thought before you can sort of just take it off the table altogether.
The governor's proposal for additional incentive money for transit-oriented includes proximity to bus line as well as the train. But it's also part of his environmental plan. So it's not like only people who don't own a car, but people who can use their car less.
The Live Work Ride bill is a perfect example of
The
that.
state of New York is doing a much more draconian process, and I'm sure you're familiar with that. Yeah.
New York has been an interesting leader on a variety of different things.
Well,
but
we'll see how that works, but it's,
Well, New
Yeah.
Jersey is what I look to.
they've added a tremendous
From
number of
Mount
units.
Vernon to
Well,
fair share
Hochul's
housing.
proposal, which is not passed the legislature, is that towns that are in the New York metropolitan area, the city metropolitan area, are required to build affordable housing. Not like you have to, and it's 830.
Statewide in New Jersey now.
Yeah, you must build it, and that's.
And they tell you how much.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, no, there's it's like X% every year. So anyway, Karen, thank you.
I just wanted to say, I think Bennett, you sent the video from Guilford
Yes.
on the Guilford thing, and they mentioned about how, in terms of transit, it's grant related, that you get more grants.
Yes.
Um,
There's specific
if you
earmarks
are
for that.
in, yeah.
Well, and it could be
transit-related.
discretion, it could be now, if this bill goes forward, that could affect discretionary funding for municipalities. if,
Right.
if
There's a bit of carrot
aren't
and stick.
compliant. So now it's gonna be the.
You wouldn't
Part of
want to,
it's,
you wouldn't want to bet on it's going forward in that form.
part of it's also just good design though, right? You don't want to put 30 units in the middle.
No,
of
it's
Well, that's where your infrastructure is also,
Yeah.
you know, we don't have water really in North Madison.
How far north do we go with the water line?
Not very far.
Green Hill Road.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yes.
And not even old there either.
No, Green Hill is not, I mean, it goes to the school. Yeah,
Yeah.
we don't have water beyond. Green
Well,
Hill.
thank you very much.
Thank
Sorry
you.
to
No,
take so much of your time.
no, it's okay.
That
I
was
really
great.
appreciate it.
Love
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
You're
And again,
welcome.
I'm happy to answer any questions one-on-one. I didn't mention, which I should have led off with, but my office is now here in Madison. So I'm very accessible to Madison folks if they need to talk about anything. So, yeah.
Well, you can stay if you want to wait till tomorrow. when you have-
I know, right? I'll just sleep over. No,
That's how I feel.
virtual.
Right.
Can imagine.
You live here now.
Yeah, exactly.
here,
Hopefully not
right
after
here.
tomorrow.
No. Yeah, the field, hopefully.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for all.
No, thanks again.
Thanks.
Take care and
Really
enjoy your
appreciate
evening.
You too.
Bye. Bye.
The next item is discussion of building an information base with local, regional, and state resources. And I don't know, Erin, do you want to talk about that? I mean, how should we involve ourselves with things with the local issues that are going to affect somehow or other? Should we be meeting jointly with the planning board? Is that, I'm just throwing things out. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just saying, is that a way of taking our next step in this process?
I think that would be very appropriate as part of the plan of conservation and development update, especially talking about the built environment and goals and incorporating, you know, the affordable housing plan into our new, you know, our new update of the plan. And then, yes, as we get into, hopefully, if I get funding for our comprehensive zoning regulation update, you know, I think it's 24, 25 fiscal year, that would be another opportunity to, you know, work in suggestions and, you know, trying to update our residential, really, our residential.
Were you involved in the draft that Guilford's just releasing?
I
Or
worked
had
on
you
that
left
for
already?
a year and a half. Yes, I have 6 versions in my basement. I worked extensively on that. And watched a lot of the video. I didn't get to watch the last bit. I know you had mentioned, you know, some of the highlights, I guess, for that were the introduction of a PDD concept, the plan development concept, which was something that both the former town planner, George Kroll, and I had approached the consultant looking to incorporate. The accessory apartment language. So PDDs, just so you know, the town of Madison, if you haven't,
Well, we had that in our first meeting. It's not a good-
We
experienced
do
that
have-
personally, yes.
we do have a plan development district regulation currently, and we have had one since 2019. Accessory apartments, that was another topic that was brought up in the video. Guilford had special, so they had they allowed for larger units up to 1,200 square feet for an accessory apartment, where Madison allows 800 currently, but they were by special permit use, which is a mandatory public hearing process. Madison is as of right.
And
currently.
Guilford's new one is.
And
as of
Guilford
right.
is amended. Guilford decided when when Public Act 21-29 came and municipalities, you know, the new statutes for accessory apartments, Guilford opted in, or, you know, did not opt out of that mandatory. So their regulation has essentially been replaced with the new statutory language. Madison did opt out. However, we opted out to maintain
specific control of our regulations and not to be, held to what the state is mandating. However, we've done a comparison and have acknowledged, both the Board of Selectmen and the Planning and Zoning Commission have not acknowledged that, an update to that section is appropriate, at least to consider size of buildings, things. We allow them in detached structures and attached structures. I think really there would be some tweaks of square footage, allow larger units and not requiring design criteria, things of that nature. But that is something on the list for our update of the regs. I'm trying to think what else was in there.
Well, let's not, Dennis has some questions, but I think if you could leave your questions that are general like that to the end, so we can stay on our agenda, because you're diverting us from our agenda every time you bring up a, sort of out of the blue kind of question.
Be happy with.
Thank you.
Yeah, so partnering with, I think the SCROG resources are a great resource to identify key people. David Fink gave me, as a follow-up from our last meeting, he gave me a list of 3 people. One is a representative from the town of Fairfield's Affordable Housing Committee. He thought would be a great person to talk to. A couple other names, so I can share those if we want to, reach out, if that's agreeable to the committee to bring in some other guests.
Fairfield is supposedly doing a good job, right?
Fairfield's had, yeah, they were. I used their draft as, and they were referenced in the state's planning for affordable when towns were mandated to create your plans. The town of Fairfield was one that was referenced in there as a good model. So yeah, it would be interesting to see, that's a Fairfield County, pretty dense, wealthy community that has made great strides.
Do you think with the planning, we should we talk to, I think Carol Snow is the chair.
Yeah, I mean,
Should we just
I
ask
think-
her if you're willing to either come with us or we could join them for, before their regular meeting or some other kind of time where we could sit down and just.
Well, it would have to be
kick around.
during a meeting.
Yep.
I think that's appropriate, whether we want to structure that specifically for the next couple of months when
I'm
we're
not
talking
sure.
about the
Yeah,
built
yeah,
environment, but absolutely. I think that's.
Any other thoughts, both on the screen here, Eric and Jen? The Board of Selectmen? Or are you going out for coffee?
Oh, no, I'm here still. I've been following along for the whole meeting. No worries.
Okay.
No. I
Any
think
thoughts
that's,
on
can you say one more time?
Any thoughts on that, with the Board of Selectmen? Is there, you are the liaison, and so you're part of our group here, so we have that. But is there sort of other issues that the board might be concerned about in terms of what we're doing or how we're doing it?
No, not at this point. I mean, as far as the Board of Selectmen is concerned, we're moving forward with our ad hoc facilities committee and, continuing to make movements with the 10-year plan. And so all of the work that you guys are doing here, we would be looking to incorporate that in the future as well.
Okay, well, that's then we will rely on you to tell us when we should be doing more than what we're doing right now, as far as
Right. No.
with the board.
Okay.
Anthony, Jane, Francine, anything?
I'm good.
Thank you.
Yeah?
Does the agenda include our elected legislative people? We talked about
State, yeah,
meeting with them as well.
yeah, I think so.
That's what I was gonna, should we, and I apologize, I don't have the list, because I couldn't read, I had my eyes dilated at the eye doctor today, so it's fairly useless for a couple hours. It's coming back. But who was our subcommittee of, it was you, Eric? Who else
No,
was reaching
Jane
out?
is our state rep person.
Or just to, not just the legal, but just for guests? Did we
No,
have
we didn't,
somebody
we really haven't
focusing on that?
discussed guests
No.
until now. This is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to put a list of, at least to put so that we have a running list of the folks that we've mentioned, so that, and email it out so that we can kind of
Good idea.
plan
Okay.
moving forward, and we can always add to it or decide, well, this person is better, more relevant when we start talking about this, or however you want to structure it. So,
Okay, well, this would be a good way to start.
yeah, and that way we won't forget, oh, we need to include state, we need, and then I could put David's list on there and Liz Torres, who is, the consultant working with, Hope. And then even some private developers who have done nonprofit, just so we're not at a loss for what are we having on our next agenda.
And the name of the person, Torres, the woman who is.
Elizabeth Torres. Yeah, Liz. She,
Housing Smarts.
yep, her company's name is Housing Smarts, and she has been really the contact, aside from Carla, that I've been dealing with on the funding aspect. She was the one who came forward with the application for the tax abatement and who's reached out for my assistance in their grant applications. So she's, for the financial end, that's a great person
Is
to
she
rely
someone
on.
we should invite for a meeting in 2 weeks? If
She's available, yeah.
Yeah, good step. Next.
Sure.
Okay. And then I think we should definitely be bringing in the representatives and the senator from, or just a conversation. I'm not sure exactly how we're going to structure that. But I'd like to hear their opinions as to what's going on from their point of view.
It might make sense to hold that just a little longer till we see which of the myriad
I think you're right.
affordable housing bills will manage to survive.
Okay, when is the legislature end their term?
The end
Not
of
till early
May.
June 7th.
Okay,
Okay.
so maybe after that would be a good time.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Well,
Yeah.
sometime
we
after
could
that.
ask, we just need to know when those, we'll all know when those bills move.
When they're coming.
So if-
I usually get notified when
If-
a hearing is
Yeah,
scheduled.
if they don't move it earlier, wait till the end of the session, it will never pass. So I think if they've got something they can push through, they're going to do it
Before that.
before then.
Okay, well, let's
Otherwise,
just
it'll
see.
just get filibustered.
You monitor this very well, so just as you.
I'd be happy
see
to
it,
find out when's the right time.
and we can put them on the list. Jane, what, you want to talk about what went back and forth and try to come up with a,
Okay.
we don't have an elevator, but we need an elevator pitch.
We're still working on our elevator pitch. Francine was very helpful in making some edits. And I think I like it the way it currently is. I think there were a few comments that it should be, there should be some additives to it. But based on what went back and forth, the last iteration basically states the following. And this would be our elevator speech and sort of mission statement combination. Quality housing at an affordable price attracts and retains residents at all stages of life, which provides stability and strengthens our community. Our mission is to provide a forum for collaboration to further the goal of ensuring affordable housing for all Madison residents. There was some comment that there should be some specific groups mentioned, but in the second part of the mission, but I feel the word forum is sort of inclusive. And I don't think we need to parse out specifics, but that's my personal opinion.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Comments, Eric, you want to say?
I like it. I agree. The sort of general leaving it more open and expansive is a good direction.
Good.
Might want to post this somewhere.
Well, I think it might be useful to run it past the first select one too. I mean,
Yeah.
just as a- Let's see what she thinks.
Yeah, to me, I thought we were working at something that was just like under our name as to this is what we're.
Yeah.
This is
Yes.
our mission.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is what we're, okay.
Yes.
I think that's. what
But
we
I think
want,
it's particularly helpful as we start meeting with people from the community.
Yeah, who
Sort
are
of
you, what are you
conversation
doing?
starter.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So,
And that could get updated on your website page.
Sure.
And that could be another conversation for a meeting. What information do we want to put on? It's kind of a mix from if you look at the Affordable Housing Committee page, there's some information from the previous committee on the page. There's some information on applying to sell or purchase a property. So we might want to clean that up and have specific links to those, the old committee's work versus your new efforts and perhaps put your vision on there and that kind of a thing. So we can
Okay.
maybe one day look at it and
I was just wondering,
Get some
Jen
opinions.
did you get a copy of this, Jen? You did not, right?
What?
No,
What Jane has
no,
produced?
it's just been.
We, it
amongst
was,
us.
there's email.
Yeah,
We just
yeah.
yeah.
So Jane, if you would send it to Jen,
Sure.
and so, and
yeah, can
Jen,
you just resend the updated one?
Yeah.
And then, yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
and you guys haven't seen either, so, right?
Not the final,
Okay, so
no.
if you would, please.
Yep.
Yep. And then the public outreach now, it's next week is the power. right?
Yes, so I'll send another separate email,
Okay.
just as a reminder for us, but we're gonna plan to meet only if you can come. I
The
mean,
senior
we would love to
center, right?
have everybody there.
Okay.
Yes, senior center, 1:00. We blocked off 1 to 3. It may not take us that long. Ben Fink will be in town to assist, and we're just gonna start identifying groups and try to figure out who would be good partners and where would be the first step for us for outreach. To start building our group.
Yeah.
You're off.
Yeah, unfortunately, on Sunday, I'm leaving the country for 2 weeks, so I won't be here. So I'm not zooming into
Hey,
anything.
Bill, it's how you.
Good.
You
Which
are-
is
you are-
fine.
But if there's,
I'm
if
already
there's,
you
like,
think
committed
of-
to be there.
if there's, like,
you think of-
if there ends up being minutes or something, whatever.
It's
won't
not
be-
a formal committee
Okay.
meeting. This is really
Well, then
just kind
somebody
of a
can just
power
phone me in.
session.
I think
Peggy's
we'll-
invited.
I'll be there too.
Okay, so somebody can.
Sorry, what
It's
day?
next
Tuesday,
Tuesday
the
at 1 o'clock.
25th, at 1:00 at the senior center. Yeah, and Prince, if you think of a group or something, if you have, it comes to mind before you leave of something you want to
Yeah.
add to the list of who you
Who you
think
think
would
is
be a
power.
good contact, let
Oh,
us
I
know
see.
and we'll just
Yeah,
incorporate
send it
it.
right or to me. Okay. And then I think once that is done, then we can consider what we want to do as far as our outreach is concerned. Either small groups or larger groups going on. May have some other questions about that? No? Okay.
We'll have plenty of time to talk about the rights. Yeah, I think there's serious consideration of requiring developers of multifamily housing to set aside X% or pay X% in dollars to an affordable housing fund administered by the town.
That's the inclusionary zone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a really powerful tool.
We don't have a fund, do we? at this
No.
point? No.
There is no fund established and there is no inclusionary zone.
Okay,
Correct.
either.
We have some incentives for affordable bonuses, bonus incentives for that, but no, there's no inclusionary yet. That's one of the considerations that's going before Guilford.
Yes, right. And that is a part of their new package that's just gone out, I think, for its first notice, 60-day notice, I think, for citizen input before they vote on
But
it.
those would be included in the research that's being done to develop the conservation and development. Would that be included in that kind of, or the strategy?
Inclusionary zoning is a concept that's discussed in the affordable housing plan. And so my opinion is that the plan of conservation and development would incorporate the affordable housing plan into it, as an addendum, since it was only done, less than a year ago. And I don't think that the town has changed in their desire since then. So yes, inclusionary zoning should come up during the built environment discussion as we're talking about development.
Right. And that process is underway now, right? I mean,
Right now, we're still in the natural environment, natural resources, resiliency,
Rocks and stones,
conservation,
trees.
that, exactly.
Right.
As we start, we will be moving towards built environment soon. So yes, that's all relevant for
I
that.
guess for another meeting, maybe the next one, Jen, I don't know if you'd be in a position to honcho this for all of us, but to get a sense of where we are with the housing inventory, especially as it applies to municipal owned land and buildings. We said we were,
Yeah, I think we want to see that.
well, we
What's
do
this? Yeah.
certainly need to understand among ourselves what's possible, what's potentially available.
Yeah.
And
You mean a list of town-owned properties?
yeah, that might be conceivably repurposed.
Right, so-
Under the right circumstances.
Yes, the committee is,
Right.
one of your charges is to identify criteria
Right.
to identify, that can be used to identify properties.
But we don't know.
Right, and then also the Ad Hoc Facilities Committee is also something that's a task being undertaken to interview members for that committee. And my understanding is members of that committee will also be looking at town-owned properties that are currently in existence, opportunities for new acquisitions. So that's a committee that's not even fully formulated yet. So there are a lot of moving gears right now that are all going to come together to make this engine work. So Aaron, do you know, I'm sure you would have access to a list of all the town
Yeah.
properties.
The facility study that was done. So DAS, we had a facility study done
Mhm.
last year, or the year before at this point. I have it saved.
Yeah,
The assessor can give us a list of town-owned properties. Some of them are not going to be, for development clearly, but at least we can get an inventory of them.
But from what Jen said, it would seem to make sense that there'd be very close coordination between us and the ad hoc land use, whatever it's called.
The facilities
Facilities.
committee,
Yeah.
yes, once they're established.
They don't exist yet, right?
Well, the committee has been formed and they're accepting applications and going through interviews.
Yeah.
So it's not,
Right.
no one's
And
seated on that committee yet.
maybe, Jen, it would be helpful even to have some reference in the charge or just something that ties that work to ours. Because there is a
In what
clear
Jane is
overlap.
drafting?
I'm sorry.
In what Jane is drafting? Yeah, that's your, what
No.
you mean by the charge?
No, I'm
The
sorry.
charge of the facilities
Charge to-
committee, I think
Facilities.
it's already been adopted.
yes.
But I can tell you that I believe I am staffed, one of the staff liaisons to that committee. So at least you have me as
Of
a.
course you are.
Well, that'll do it then.
Tying into
Yeah.
that, Aaron, you said that there is a transit study taking place. I don't think I received any information on that.
The survey, you mean?
Potentially.
I don't believe that survey is even closed yet.
No, it is available on the town's website. And actually, what's kind of interesting, and before we run out of power on my computer here, the town is, it was Estuary Transit District. They have a new name. They rebranded and kind of merged. They are, on behalf of the town of Guilford and Madison, we've partnered on this in association with SCROG, our Regional Council of Governments. We're making an application for funding for a 2-year pilot program for, it's called First Mile, is the Estuary Transit District's program. It's a micro transit program. It's small bus service, essentially, 4 buses that it's on-demand service. Where you can call and have a ride come and take you to a destination within Madison or Guilford. So we've been in the planning ends. The application is due on the 28th. They may extend the deadline. This program exists currently and is being run in Old Saybrook in a certain area in their transit, downtown area. It's been very successful. Estuary Transit has done one now along the Wesleyan campus as well for Middletown. And they thought that we would, because they already have all the software, that they would be a great partner to try this pilot, which would really open up public transportation to North Madison, North Guilford, and our two communities. So we're excited about that, and we're hopeful that, you know, that could really open up and connect to public, you know, either the train or bus line. But it's a different way of showing, it may not be transit oriented, but to show that we are able to reach folks in other ways. And even with our seniors, to take some of the stresses off our senior, you know, beach and rec and senior services, where they currently provide a lot of these services and may not be able to get to everybody at the time. So it's a good partnership.
I have just one question, which I'm not sure anybody knows anything about, but the property that's across from the Wellington on the other side of US 1, that was the marina that closed down. It's been sitting around now for a couple of years.
Marina Landing.
Does anyone know where that stands?
It's an approval. They have a special exception approval. It's
They do.
mixed use development, has not started development. So
Yeah.
that's pretty much,
But it's been approved.
Oh, yeah.
That's a long time ago.
yes. And they came in
Yeah.
and modified their plan, I believe, you know, they're still within their time frame. I don't know if the current property owner is looking to develop that or sell it as,
With the plan. Yeah,
you know, with the approval.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Okay, we have a plan, or at least outline a plan for the next meeting, and any other statements, questions? Anybody want to add anything more? No, down here? Okay,
Good.
well then we stand adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thanks, gang.
Thanks to all of you guys.
Thank you.
Bye, Eric.